Okay, class, we are now further talking about bone, and we're looking at bone classifications by density and by shape. By density and by shape. Okay. In terms of density, we have what we call compact bone, or also called substantia compacta. This would be an example of that right there. See how compact it looks, how solid that looks? Just to give you an example. Then we have what we call spongy bone, which is also called substantia spongiosa or cancellous bone. See how spongy? There's spongy bone right there, big blow up. Spongy bone. So in our bodies, we have both compact bone and spongy. And it depends on where the weight bearing is going to be. Let me say it again. It depends on where the weight bearing. See, here's another thing I want you to remember. We said that bone is lightweight. So in areas that you do not need a lot of strength, you could use spongy bone. In areas you do, you could use compact bone. Sometimes you'll have spongy, like in the skull, between two compact. Now, I don't know how many. I know some of you are young. There are certain homes called the old colonial homes from the early days that have the columns in the front of the house on the porch, the white columns, so they can be other colors. Many times the colonial, they had the white columns. I have a house that has columns myself in one of my houses. So anyway, sometimes those posts, those columns are solid depending on the weight of the roof. And sometimes they are hollow in the center, because the rim of the column would be hard, good, strong wood. So you really didn't need a center. Of course, if it's a real heavy house, let's say a 2-story colonial, that the column goes all the way up, then you may need a solid post there. But obviously, a solid is much heavier than one that would have it on the rim. Well, my point is that where in the human body, where you need strength, you put compact. But if you don't, you try to put it where it's more lightweight, we'll say. All right, anyway, going further. Shape classification of bone. We have flat bones, long bones, short bones, and irregular shapes. Now, this is my term here, so I just wanted to make it's not in the book, and it's not. The long and short bones are kind of round, sort of like one of those colonial columns, to be honest. So that's my term. But actually, the official name is flat, long, short, and irregular. Okay. So when we look at that, let's just look at this picture here. Here's a long bone. Okay. Here's a flat bone like the sternum. Here's irregular shape. And here's kind of a short bone that would be like in the ankle and so forth like that there. They kind of more roundish in a way, but again, that's my own deal. So flat, long, short, and irregular shape. Okay. So now we go to the structure of a long bone. Now, why I picked the long bone to look at the structure? Because the long bone has all of the features. The other bones do not, but the long bone has every feature. These other bones don't, so it's best to learn all the features, and then these others, there would be less features in them. Okay, so we go here. All right. The epiphysis. The epiphysis, using the long bone, okay, this bone here happens to be the one, your arm bone, that's the humerus, but anyway, that's not important at this point. The epiphysis are the ends of the bone. So that's the epiphysis, here's the epiphysis. That's the proximal one, because that's the one that would be hooked to in your shoulder, and this would be the distal. This would be hooked to your bones below, okay, radius and ulna. All right. The diaphysis is this part up in here. That's that mid region of the bone, shaft of the long bone. The metaphysis is a region right here between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. So there's a little region there. That's where your growth plates actually are, would be there. That's the metaphysis, region between the epiphysis and diaphysis. Okay. The medullary cavity is this cutout region right here. This medullary cavity. Okay. The periosteum is a tissue surrounding the bone. So think of having your bone. Let's say I took a bone out of the cabinet and then put a sock around it, slid a sock. Now you'd have to cut the other end of the sock off. So you slide the sock, and let's say it fits tight against the bone. Well, assume the sock is connective tissue, and that would be the periosteum surrounding the bone. Okay. The endosteum are a layer of cells right in there that surround the medullary cavity. You don't see that now. It's the endosteum. The articular surface. Okay, articulate in anatomy. Okay, now see, here's a word. Some words in English mean two things. Articulate in regular English means to speak, to be able to articulate, to speak well. Articulate in anatomy means a joint. Articulate in anatomy means a joint. So right here are your articular surfaces. That's where your joints are. This would hook to where your shoulder hooks to, which would be the scapula, and this would hook to the radius and ulna. So the articular, see how smooth it is? And that's covered by cartilage when we get ready to talk about it. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Here would be, so here's compact bone right here. See, this is a wedge out of the shaft. Compact bone, then spongy bone. Up in here would have been the medullary cavity. This right here, I'm highlighting, that right there, that would have been the periosteum surrounding that bone area. Okay, so I want you to look at that in your text and study hard on that bone structure. Okay. Okay, so the epiphysis is an expanded end. It has a spongy bone interior. Remember, we don't put bone where we don't have to. A spongy bone interior. The epiphyseal line is really in the metaphysis, and that's where the growth plate used to be. See, the line is the remnant of the growth plate, where you grow in length. Articular cartilage, articular surface, that would be that there. So we go further. Here's the proximal epiphysis distal, and you'd have to have that within the skeleton to know which hooks to which. I mean, you don't have to if you already know where it hooks, because you can have it laying on the table and know this is proximal and distal. Okay. Diaphysis is here. The diaphysis, there's a compact bone here to give strength like that, like see with those colonial posts. And the middle has spongy bone, and then up in here is the wet part, which would be the medullary cavity. That medullary cavity, when you're real young, is filled with blood-making stuff. That's why they call it red bone marrow. But as you get into your teenage years, it starts changing and becoming fat. So in here, young, red bone marrow, older, yellow bone marrow. Okay? Adults, yellow bone marrow replaced with fat. Okay, let's go further now. All right, so there's the picture again. The metaphysis is the wider portion of the long bone, which you don't see, they don't have it shown here, but it's that junction between, adjacent to, of a long bone adjacent to the epiphyseal plate, is this part of the bone that grows during childhood. See, that's the growth plate. It ossifies, that means becomes bone. See, the growth plate is cartilage. Listen to me. The growth plate is cartilage when we talk about it. The growth plate is cartilage. But it ossifies later, and that's when you stop growing, roughly about 18 to 25, but it depends on the bone. Some bones go longer than others. Okay. Yep, epiphyseal plate called the growth plate. Okay. This is my drawing to kind of show you that. Kind of show you where that plate is. Right up in here, that metaphysis. Okay. Clinical significance. Because of the rich blood supply, metaphyseal long bone are prone to hematogenous spread and osteomyelitis in children. Tumors can occur there and so forth like that. Okay. So we go further. Membranes of the bone. the periosteum. Now, the periosteum actually has 2 layers to it. The periosteum actually has 2 layers to it on that periosteum, okay? It has an outer fibrous layer, and the outer fibrous layer is a dense, irregular collagen connective tissue. A dense, irregular collagen connective tissue. Fibers going in all directions. Then it has an intercellular layer, an outer fibrous layer and an intercellular layer. Now, let's add to this. Remember I said that it would be like sliding a sock over the middle of the bone. Okay? Remember I said that. Well, think about it. The sock would slide up and down. So what you have are what we call these Sharpie fibers. These are fibers that go into the bone. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the old-fashioned basketball goals at homes. What we would have to do with the basketball goal is put it in cement. You'd put the goal down and then put the cement and let it harden around it. You didn't put the cement, let it get hard and dig in and put the basketball goal. So you would put the goal down and then put cement, liquid cement, and let it harden. Well, what happens, some of the fibers of the outer fibrous layer pierce through into the bone while it's being formed. So when the bone finally gets formed, the fibers are stuck in there, and that would anchor this fibrous periosteum and the whole periosteum, and those are called Sharpie's fibers. See, some things used to be named after people in early days. That's how they credited. That's how they credited. It's called Sharpie's fibers. That's an eponym. Okay? So what you have, though, which you don't see in this picture, is an outer fibrous layer, and then you have an inner layer of cells that actually osteoblasts, cytes, and everything. That's the inner osteogenic layer because to make the bone. So some will call it the inner osteogenic layer, or some will call it the inner cellular layer. So so what it would be like, again, you got your sock. That would be the outer fibers, but you put some marbles or some BBs underneath the sock. The BBs underneath the sock would be the cells, and the sock would be the outer fibrous layer. Okay? So in there you would have these type of cells there. Then you have to have nerve fibers. See, bone has nerve, it has blood vessels. See, bone might seem like cement because you think, well, it's hard, but there are living cells up in there. That's a big subject we got to talk about. When you put the calcium down, I'm going to say this again. When the calcium gets put down on bone, the cells cannot breathe. When the calcium gets put down on the bone, what? The cells cannot breathe, but they have to live. So a sophisticated pipeline system must be cut. Listen to me. In compact bone, a sophisticated pipeline system must be cut. Because these cells are right in the middle of bone, and they have to live. But a calcified matrix cuts off the air supply. So it's a sophisticated pipeline system. I don't know how many have ever seen underneath an anthill. You know, sometimes you can buy those, they'll sell those, where you can see all those tunnels. All those fantastic tunnels the ants have cut to be able to, well, that's kind of how it looks within bone, we'll say. These tunnels are in there in order to gain access to air and nutrients for the cells immersed out there. Okay? Bone also has nerve fibers. It has nerve fibers. Okay? So we go further. Okay? So the endosteum is this inner layer. This would be a layer of cells inside here, the endosteum. Okay? That's what we have. All right? So here, right here is quickly the outer fibrous layer, intercellular layer, and so forth. Okay? So we will stop right here and pick it up. We're going to start at that picture right there. We'll start at that picture right there to get a further understanding of this periosteum and so forth. Right? Thank you.